When most of us think of Superman, we always tend to imagine him as the perfect hero. He's the strongest man alive and the literal symbol of hope. In fact, this is one of the reasons that people will always say they don't like him or that he's not their favorite, because he doesn't feel complex enough. Of course, the recent Superman film definitely showed us that he can be a nice guy and still have more to it. Still grapple with existential questions and identity crises. But the exploration of what happens when Superman reaches the edge of his own story was done a long time ago with Superman Beyond. Writers like Grant Morrison took a different route with this godly hero. They wanted to explore something much bigger. They wanted to explore the question of why Superman matters in the first place. Why has this character survived for so long while so many other heroes have faded away? And in so many ways, Superman Beyond isn't really about Clark Kent. It's about the idea of Superman itself. Throughout a bunch of timelines and universes and continuities, Superman Beyond shows us a Clark Kent who's outlived the traditional superhero phase of his life. He's outlived his era and even his friends and all that was once familiar. It makes us face the reality of a godlike being slowly losing his divinity. He's just an aging hero trying to find his place in a future that has moved on. And that's why these stories are so important to DC. So today, we're going to go through the entire life and journey of Superman Beyond, from Final Crisis to Batman Beyond, and so much more. This video will answer all your questions, particularly what really happens to Superman Beyond at the end of his story. So let's get started.
Good to see you, Bruce. It's been a while.
Final Crisis, Superman Beyond. Okay, so this story started during one of the darkest and most infamous events in DC history, aka Final Crisis. Reality is literally collapsing and Darkseid is on the verge of victory. But there's something even greater weighing on Clark Kent's mind. You see, a massive explosion at the Daily Planet leaves Lois Lane, the Lois Lane, love of Kent's life, at the edge of death. In this first issue's opening panel, we see her in a coma and everyone is doing everything they can, but nothing seems to be working. And naturally, Superman is losing it because all the power in the world can't magically save Lois. He can literally move planets and fly faster than the speed of light, but in this case, he's helpless. He'd do absolutely anything to take all her pain away. Anything. And that's when the mysterious celestial monitor named Zilovala appears, quite literally stopping time and reality in its tracks. She knows Clark Kent is Superman and offers Clark a desperate solution to his problem. He's obviously hesitant because his infrared massages are the only thing keeping Lois's heart going, but she tells him about how the universe is dying and needs his help in saving it. All he would have to do is leave his universe behind immediately to fight in a war across dimensions, along with the other greatest super champions of the universe. And in return, she would give him a single drop of bleed, or ultramenstrum, which is the secret substance of life itself, the universal medicine that could restore and cure Lois. Obviously, that bit of info convinces Clark immediately, especially since he could read her body language and he knows that she's telling the truth. All he cares about is his wife, and he would pretty much do anything for her. Zilovala explains that he has no need to worry because she's frozen time with her chrono paralyzer, and as time thaws, Lois's heart would beat once more and then stop. But Superman would be back long before that, and that was that. Clark Kent switched to Superman and embarked on the journey of the reality-crossing ship Ultima Thule. Here he meets a whole crew of various Supermen from a bunch of parallel worlds and universes. There was Captain Marvel of Earth 5, who's like the golden age of heroism. Then you had Overman from Earth 10, who's a tragic, guilt-ridden version raised by Nazis. There's also Ultraman from the Antimatter universe, who's the literal antithesis of Clark. And finally, there's Alan Adam, the Captain Atom of Earth 4, who's basically obsessed with quantums and mathematical probabilities and things like that. But the moment they're about to board the vessel, things go horribly wrong. They're somehow attacked, and Superman even needs to develop 4D vision to really understand what the hell is happening. Their ship hurls through multiple universes as the Supermen lift it and stop it from crashing, until they finally land in nowhere. Yeah, they're in Limbo, which is literally like a conceptual graveyard. And they're greeted by a whole team led by the King of Limbo, Merryman. He tells them that they won't be able to leave, just like him. He, too, was a superhero before he ended up in Limbo, and it's a ruthless place. Nothing happens, and the people slowly fade away as they lose their memories and identity. But here, they also find out about the library in Limbo, and the single book it houses. A book with infinite pages that contains every book ever possible. And that's when it hits them. The Ultima Thule computer has infinite memory and could read all the pages at once and download its own manual to repair itself. So of course they try to recover it, but it's insanely heavy with its infinite pages. And as Captain Marvel and Superman try to lift the book, they end up reading a story about a monitor, or rather an origin story of the race of monitor. And it warns them of a sinister being rising to power, Mandrak. The energy of the book is too much even for these two heroes, and Captain Marvel is reduced to his other form as Billy, and Superman has had enough. He converts confronts Zillow Vala, asking her who sent the destroyer after them and who the hell is Mandrak, the monitor, who feeds on stories and hope. But everything's going wrong by this time. Zillow Vala has sacrificed Overman for his lifeblood, and you can see just how terrified she is when he speaks of Mandrak, the Dark Monitor. Unfortunately, he had found them, and Ultraman had finally completely turned towards evil. He had even managed to procure the Infinite Book and had read the ending, which convinced him that evil always wins and that God hates them all. And that God is Mandrak himself. A huge clash breaks out in Limbo as the residents and our heroes start fighting against these phantom armies. But Marvel, Captain Atom, and Superman, they figure out a way to try and stop existence itself from ending. You see, Dax Novu, before becoming Mandrak, had conceptualized an ultimate weapon, a living weapon. It was a thought robot that would be able to adapt and counter any future threat, like a sentinel unit of sorts. And this is what they managed to achieve. How? You know how every Superman variation had purpose? Even Billy. Well, Ultraman and Superman had theirs too, and it was to fuse into one another and become a robot-like entity of pure thought called Cosmic Armor Super. And it's this thought robot that finally battles Mandrak. Interestingly, this isn't just a physical fight, but also a battle of concepts. Mandrak attacks with the heat of 10 billion suns and the blood of 52 universes, while the thought robot Superman constantly adapts to each and every move. But the cosmic armor is slowly cracking, and that's when Zillow Vala tries to stop them. But with just one of his devastating energy blasts, he kills her. And that's when it's revealed that she was once the lover of Dax Novu. Superman finally gets a moment to recuperate and returns with even more grit and determination. They fight back and forth, landing blows and words. But Thought Robot Superman's will perseveres, and he figures out a way to end the fight. As they reach the very edge of existence, with one final heat vision blast, Superman manages to shove Mandrak off the edge and into the Overvoid. And the most fascinating bit, they said nothing could contain or hold the bleed, but they were wrong. Superman could. He placed the drop of blood on Lois's lips, and she slowly opened her eyes. And that's Superman Beyond for you. A story about stories and hope and love.
You'll outlive us all, Bruce. You're too stubborn to die.
Superman Beyond in the Batman Beyond animated series. Okay, so now we come back to Earth, specifically the Earth of the DC animated universe. Now, if you watched Batman Beyond, you'll know how the tone shifted from the OG Batman the Animated Series. In Batman Beyond, Gotham was much older and was run by a bunch of corporate syndicates and street gangs. And we had a new young Batman, Terry McGinnis, guided by an 80-year-old Bruce Wayne. Now, Superman appears in the two-part episode The Call. He's voiced by Christopher McDonald, who'd actually previously voiced Superman's father, Jor-El. And it makes sense, because this Superman is old and gray and he's already weathered the world. He doesn't wear his typical uniform and trades it in for a black and white keephless one. But under this was a mystery simmering. You see, it all started when there was an assassination attempt on the Justice League Unlimited member Micron in Metropolis. Then we shifted to Neo Gotham, where Terry McGinnis' Batman was confronting the shape-shifting Ink. And when Ink dares to hold a seemingly helpless bystander as a hostage, she ends up making her biggest mistake. That bystander turns out to be Superman and literally scatters Mystique across the pavement. He then joins Terry at the Batcave and comes face to face with an old and cynical Bruce Wayne. And holy shit, is the atmosphere tense and icy as hell. But they cut any small talk and get straight to business. Why the hell is Superman there? He says he's there to offer Terry a spot on the JLU. And despite being starstruck and overwhelmed by the offer, he does eventually accept. Of course, this move's not very welcomed by the other League members. Warhawk, Big Barda, Cairo, and Aquagirl all treat him with hostility. And just as Terry thinks that this was a bad decision, Superman tells him the real reason Terry's here. Someone inside the Justice League is sabotaging the team and was responsible for Micron's situation. And Terry had to use his detective skills to root out the imposter. Terry's hesitant at first to believe that any of them would be traitors, but he's proved wrong when Aquagirl gets trapped in a swim tank, which is overheating. Unfortunately, the saboteur struck again when the team was responding to an emergency in Metropolis, and Warhawk's armor was caught in an explosion, which seemingly killed him. Having had enough of feeling a little lost, Terry regroups with Bruce, and they analyze the data from the Batmobile to reveal that Superman had used his heat ray vision to cause the explosion that killed Warhawk. Shocked at the news, Bruce gives Terry a little piece of glowing kryptonite, telling him to do whatever it takes. Then the second episode picks up as Terry returns to the Watchtower and shows the rest of the League members the footage. There's quite a bit of initial hesitation in believing that Superman could be the traitor, but all of that fades away when Warhawk reveals himself to be alive and confirms Terry's suspicions of Superman. The team eventually confronts him, and they have a brief altercation before Superman leaves for the Fortress of Solitude. The team follows him and they're horrified at what they find. Turns out, there's a whole chamber beneath the Fortress of Solitude, and it houses Starro the Conqueror. You know, the huge parasitic alien starfish? Superman was never a willing traitor. He was being mind-controlled this entire time, and the team finds that out when they see a starfish-like creature planted on his skin. A flashback reveals that centuries ago, Starro was abducted by the Preserver, and only years before, he was finally rescued by Superman. And since he didn't have a way to return the starfish creatures to their aquatic home, he kept them in the fortress. But Starro made his move and decided to feign control of Superman. Who wouldn't want to take control over the world's strongest superhero, right? So he took a chance one day when Superman was feeding it and leapt onto him and took over his mind. The team then finds thousands of such starry creatures who are being bred by the mind-controlled Superman. Unfortunately, disaster struck when the creatures attached themselves to the rest of the League members, all except Batman, who managed to escape using the Batmobile. Starro's Superman does manage to catch up with him, and they enter into a scuffle, but Batman manages to electrocute the creature and incapacitate it long enough to pull it off Superman's chest. After God knows how many years of being a mental slave, Superman is finally back in control. But the nightmare is far from over. Terry quickly catches Superman up with all the happenings as they return to the fortress to save the rest of the team. But the next step of Starro's plan was actually to open up the pool of Starro spawns into the ocean. Though Superman manages to free most of the members, Aquagirl opens up the pool door. Batman then scatters to try and save her, while Superman comes up with another plan to block the exit. Finally, with the threat coming to an end, Superman does what he should have done all those years ago. He helps Starro and his little baby starfish return to their homeworld via the boom tube. At the end, Superman realizes that even though he was trapped in years of darkness, a new generation has stepped up and taken over the mantle. He even offers Terry a permanent full-time position on the team. Looks like the intern has been promoted to a full-time employee, but he stays true to the teachings of his mentor Bruce and declines the offer, because Batman's first priority will always be Gotham. He'll always hear the call when they really need him, but for now, it was goodbye. What I like about this Superman Beyond is it shows the number of adventures he's been on and all the things he's seen and done. Imagine having been the world's greatest superhero only to have an alien starfish brainwash you for years. But most importantly, this version shows that no matter how old Superman gets, he will always be an integral part of the team, even when he's actually a saboteur. Superman Beyond 2012. With Superman Beyond 2012, tomorrow had finally arrived for the supposed Man of Tomorrow. The comic takes place in the Batman Beyond future, and the world is completely altered. Metropolis now has massive-ass skyscrapers, and technology is part of everything, everyone, and every day. In issue 0, we find out that Superman has disappeared and left Earth after taking down his long-term nemesis, Lex Luthor. He was out there aiding other species and fighting off alien invasion. He was older, slower, and grayer, but still not stopped. The world and time had left him behind. Lois Lane was no longer alive. Even his parents were gone. It was just him and his slow-aging Kryptonian biology. However, in his absence, Metropolis had turned into an absolute shit show, and the League was struggling to get a grasp on things. Finally, Superman returns, but he wonders what his place is in this new future, if the world even needed a Superman anymore. And then he suddenly hears that the Justice League was fighting a new creature called Armageddon. Of course, Superman can't help himself and joins the fight, stopping the creature. But the monster thrashes him to the ground and makes his exit to reunite with his daughter. Superman is clearly not the super he once was, but that's not stopping. He continues the fight as he takes Armageddon up, and above in a whirlwind he creates until the creature finally turns back into a human form and they fall back to Earth. Superman lives, maybe a little more weathered and weak, but alive nonetheless. The rest of the comic follows him on his journey of figuring out his role in a world that he doesn't recognize and that didn't recognize him in return. At one point, starting from issue 11, his journey takes a very interesting turn as he takes on the alias of Cal Kent and gets a new day job as a Metropolis firefighter. Instead of saving planets in reality-ending crises, he just wants to help real people of Metropolis trapped inside burning buildings. But unfortunately, that chapter doesn't really last too long since his past comes right back. The ghost of Lex Luthor is still haunting him. Turns out the main antagonist of the story is Lucinda Walters, aka Lucinda Luthor, the mysterious and unknown daughter of Lex Luthor. You see, after the death of her mother, Lucinda discovered a bunch of recordings and holographs of her father, leaving behind a mission for her: destroy Superman. And that's her motive. Unlike her father, who wanted power and influence, Lucinda simply wanted to finish her father's unfinished business, and from the shadows. She starts to distribute a dangerous street drug throughout New Metropolis. At first, it seems like the drug is meant to turn users into temporary supers. All kinds of criminals and druggies end up with terrifying powers, and there's chaos everywhere. The powers are obviously unstable and super dangerous, but the real reason behind the drugs is that they contain synthetic kryptonite compounds. The master plan was to poison Superman, and that's exactly what happened. The drug spread kryptonite throughout the entire city, and slowly but surely weakened Clark every time he used his power. And that's one hell of a plan, because Superman can't just fight and punch it. The very city he was protecting was becoming toxic to him. What a paradox, am I right? And the usual villains that he would deal with so easily suddenly weren't so easy anymore. The return of Solomon Grundy exemplified this personally. For the OG Superman, a fight against Grundy would be another day at the office. But this Superman could barely keep up. He was already old, and Lucinda's kryptonite poisoning was making things even worse. And now here, the series introduces a really cool concept of the Eradicator armor. He knows that his powers are no longer enough and needs some extra help. So he begins using a super advanced armored suit using Eradicator technology. It channeled artificial solar energy into his body like a weird life support system of sorts. And as the crisis keeps growing, Terry McGinnis enters the picture. And I genuinely love his inclusion and the dynamic between him and Clark. He's the younger generation who's taken over the savior role, and he's more tech savvy and futuristic and in line with the new world. And together with Superman's wisdom and experience, they investigate Lucinda's undercover operations and trace the source of the kryptonite distribution network. We also see Superman and the League fight an alien threat known as the Mangal. But Superman's purpose is no longer about saving the world or defeating another invasion or being the hero under the spotlight. That's what's important about Superman Beyond. He isn't trying to restore his power or become the strongest. He's trying to accept the new reality and who he's become. So, by the end of this comic series, Superman finds peace with the idea that he isn't the same hero he once was, and that it was okay. He didn't need to be. He realized that being Superman was never about invincibility. It was about hope. This Superman continuity focused on what made him human, and that's the best possible thing they could have done. They showed us that even Superman couldn't stop time. Justice League Beyond comics. Now, we say Superman struggles with age and loneliness in the whole new future, but Justice League Beyond shows us a different side to his character. He went from isolated hero to senior statesman of the future Justice League. He's back to being the man, the myth, and the legend. Of course, he isn't the main protagonist. That role belongs to Terry McGinnis, who's the quintessential young hero, learning what it means to be a part of the team, much like Wally West or Kyle Rayner. But Superman is still the heart and soul of the League. He represents the old heroic standard the future Justice League is built around. All the younger members of the team exist because heroes like Superman paved the way for them. Superman walked so they could run. The team includes Superman, Batman Beyond, along with Aquagirl, Big Barda, Warhawk, Micron, and Green Lantern Kai-Ro. And in the major storyline, Constriction sees the team face off with Cobra. The terrorist organization and cult have something much more dangerous up their sleeve this time. They managed to manipulate and brainwash Micron, and we're using stolen technology and ancient components to resurrect an ancient god of destruction. Yeah guys, the threat just escalated to a 12. And throughout all of this, Clark is one of the League's most powerful fighters and wise moral compass of sorts. He's like a lighthouse, providing guidance and leadership whenever the young members start to question themselves or start struggling. He would remind them why they're fighting in the first place, just with massive stakes and the world at the brink of destruction. No big deal, right? The continuity gives Superman a new role. He's like the veteran who inspires the next generation. And Justice League Beyond ultimately shows us that no matter how old Clark gets or how his role changes, he'll never stop being Superman. League Beyond 2.0. After Batman Beyond, this storyline follows the fights between the Justice League versus the Justice Lords. We start off in Neo Gotham, where corporations are taking over and a group of Jokers are causing chaos. Superman Beyond enters the storyline in his black and white suit, and he's talking to our young Batman about the Justice Lords. He tells him that the Justice Lords were mirror images of them, and not just evil, but rather corrupt, something that they could become too if they're not careful. The Justice Lords world has so far gone that Lex Luthor had become president and killed the Flash. And because Luthor had escaped justice so many times, Superman decided to take it into his own hands and killed him. But we all know that crossing such lines has a domino effect, and the more lines you cross, the easier it gets. Eventually, the Justice Lords had almost eradicated their world of crime, but also turned it into a sort of dictatorship police state, where they were at the top. And when they discovered this Earth, they decided to do the same thing here. But thankfully, the Justice League managed to stop them and capture them with the help of their Lex Luthor. However, what the hell would they do with them? Well, they decided to rationally explain things and send the Lords back to their world stripped of their power. Of course, rationality doesn't work on most people, and this threat was far from over. Eventually, they had to go over to their Earth when Lord Batman and Lord Superman clashed. However, they had to return when their own Earth was facing a massive threat. And even after coming back to Beyond Earth, Superman was suspicious and waiting for the other shoe to drop, particularly when Diana, who stayed back with Lord Superman, finally returned. He confides all of this in Terry and tells him that the Diana who's returned might not be their Diana, and he wants to send him to the Justice Lord's world to find Lord Batman. Once Terry leaves, Superman finally gets the chance to speak to Diana and asks if her Lord Batman was dead. He knew what it was to lose someone you love, and he could see it in Diana. He asks her what happened, and it turns out the war spread immensely and Lord Superman was clearly winning, especially when Lord Batman was killed. And that's when we realize Lord Superman is on a rampage. And next, he makes his grand entrance on Beyond Earth with the rest of the Justice Lords. Immediately, a fight breaks out, and we find out that he had come for Diana, who had actually become his wife. Surprise, surprise. Superman realizes that his corrupt counterpart is fully powered again, and he, in his fragile state, couldn't possibly take him on. But we all know that Superman was never meant to be the hero of this story. That's when a new twist is introduced in the form of a young Kryptonian boy called Zod. And guess what? he's the biological son of Lord Superman and Wonder Woman. He was stolen by Brainiac and raised by Jax Orr in the Phantom Zone as a weapon to be used against Superman. But fortunately, Superman had rescued him from the Phantom Zone and named him Superboy. While the Justice Lords were attacking the Watchtower, Zod was resting in the fortress. Unfortunately, the Justice Lords by then had managed to defeat all of the Justice League members, and Lord Superman asked if that was it. That's when they find out about Terry, who'd already been sent to the Justice Lord's world. Meanwhile, Bruce Wayne wasn't really a danger. Superman is with Wonder Woman, and the boy, aka Zod, was in the fortress. So, Lord Superman decides to return to his world and deal with the whole Batman problem as he faces off against Batman, ultimately winning and seemingly killing Terry. Now, on this side of things, Superman and Batman are interrogating Diana, and she reveals that it was she who killed Lord Batman. Not with her own hands, but it was she who was responsible, because it was Lady Diana who snapped her neck. She retaliated by killing Lady Diana, and ultimately, she wed Lord Superman. Her storytelling is cut short since Zod has awoken and come face to face with the Justice Lords and sent a distress signal to Superman. Superman, in the meantime, is increasingly frustrated with Diana's action. They even get into a temporary scuffle that Bruce has to then stop. Eventually, they come to a truce as they empathize with Diana's side of the story and together plan a counterattack to defeat the Justice Lords. But their heartfelt reunion is cut short by the arrival of Lord Superman and the Justice Lords, who brought the fight to them instead. Superman tries to attack Lord Superman, but first he needs to get through the Justice Lords. Meanwhile, Lord Superman was only interested in confronting Diana first. Superman tells her not to be careless since the Justice Lords have a clear number advantage over them. Now, Lord Superman is about to kill Diana when a boy attacks him from behind. This boy introduces himself as Zod. He refuses their family reunion and rejects both of them as parents. And no matter how much Lord Superman tries to convince him to join him and become a symbol of hope for the Justice Lord's Earth, he refuses. He protects his mother Diana, who in return comes to his rescue too. Superman in the meantime has reinforcements in the form of the Justice League, who manage to escape their confines and they join the fight against the Justice Lords. Eventually, they successfully neutralize them and even convince them to join their side. And together, both teams join Zod and Diana against Lord Superman. Of course, Lord Superman still has a trick or two up his sleeve, and it was the machine that Lex Luthor had created to defeat him. He used it to neutralize all of them, but there was one member who wasn't there. Yeah, it was Terry, who was actually alive because he'd used holographics to trick Lord Superman. And finally, Batman returned and arrived in Lord Batman's suit. Oh, he was ready for a brawl too. But his Kryptonian suit and batarangs still struggle against the experienced Lord Superman. He taunts Terry, saying that he was too weak to do what was needed, and that was a problem with this world. It was too soft. But this is when Superman arrives from behind and stabs him with the kryptonite batarang that Terry had dropped. Superman's powers were gone, but now so were Lord Superman. And he almost kills Lord Superman, stopping himself at the very last minute. Because if he did, what would the difference be between him and Lord Superman? So, he walks away. Lord Superman still tries to keep fighting, but Terry holds his ground. With yet another kryptonite blast, he's once again thrashed on the ground. Superman tries to ask him to stop, but he's stubborn as hell. And then comes the final blow from none other than Bruce Wayne. My guy is 80 and can still kick ass. Finally, the story ends with Lord Superman being sent to the Phantom Zone where he meets Jax Orr. And as for our Superman Beyond, well, he has a sweet and genuine conversation with Diana and invites her not only to stay on their Earth, but also in the Justice League to try and mend their relationship with Zod. After all, Superman is all about second chances. But most importantly, by the end of the arc, he finds peace. He finds reassurance that they wouldn't become like Lord Superman. He was happy and proud of what they'd become, and even more proud of the heroes who were taking over. What really happens to Superman Beyond in the end? So after everything we've uncovered, from the parasitic manipulation of Starro to the epic Justice Lords fight, the real question is, what really happens to Superman Beyond in the very end? Well guys, if you're looking for some definitive answer where Clark dies in some tragic but epic moment like Iron Man in Endgame, prepare to be disappointed as hell. Batman Beyond doesn't take that cliche route, and that's the most beautiful bit. His story's left open-ended. What happens to him is actually an emotional journey of acceptance. He grows older and continues to outlive almost everyone he's ever loved. Of course, he isn't immortal, so his powers continue to steadily decline. And even when Lex Luthor's traps threaten the Earth or some new cosmic threat emerges, Superman still rises up to fight. He rises because he knows now that being Superman was never about the power or about being an invulnerable god. His powers were just tools. The real superhero factor was the choice he made, the choice that a little farm boy from Kansas made, to care about humanity, to protect the weak and stand up for what was right and good. And that's what the ending of Superman Beyond signified. He would always choose hope, even if the godlike part of him were completely fading away. So what do you guys think about Superman Beyond? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe buttons and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss any more superhero content from us. We'll see you real soon. Have a great day, be safe, and as always, stay marvelous.